is only a transition to a different sphere of consciousness. Carol Ann is not like those she's with. She is a living presence in their spiritual earthbound plane.
Hello and welcome to episode 100 of the Talking to the Dead podcast. This podcast has been going for nearly 3 years, and I just took quite an extended break, as you'll probably know if you're a regular listener. My last episode, 99, was recorded when I was on a retreat in Manderscheid in the Eifel in Germany, and it was then that I came to the conclusion that the work that I've been doing for the last 3 years is coming rapidly to a conclusion, and that I had sort of said nearly everything I needed to say. I think I've conveyed so much information from the spirit world, from my own research, and also about interdimensional beings and the coming disclosure that is so important to the world. When I was away for 6 or 7 weeks, I had a chance to reevaluate my life considerably and think a lot about what is important to me and what I need to do in order to be happy. The reason is that the last 3 years has made me incredibly happy to be able to do all of this, but equally it made me so hyper aware of what's going on in the world in terms of news, in terms of what potentially could happen with worldwide disclosure, that we are not alone, but also how that links to our perception of death and the life that exists all around us and is not so much life after death, but it is part of our experience as conscious beings. I've learned so much, and those of you who are new to the podcast, please start at the beginning and listen. And those of you who've been following it for the last 3 years, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. But the realization I came to was that I cannot do this anymore. And the reason is that I need to focus now on what's coming and my life, and to try to cut out all the interference that's come. That's because after a while, there is just so much information coming in, particularly if you are a psychic medium. It starts to disturb your sleep, it disturbs your daily work, and eventually you begin to see things slightly out of perspective. You start putting more attention on the things that you're channeling and the things that you're researching and creating this podcast, rather than perhaps the more important things, such as my mental health, my family, my friends, and just hoping that things are about to change for all of us, but watching it more as a backseat driver rather than a person sitting right in the front trying to get closer and closer. I know we've nearly reached our destination, and that's why I feel very comfortable doing this. But before I finally tune out of this podcast forever, and probably I will write the third book to go with this third series. So again, if you're interested, you can get these books on Amazon. And I will also do my best to do an audio book of it as well. But before I do tune out of all of this, I want to just quickly talk about something else. I wanted to know how this podcast should end. It's not an easy thing, but for me, the idea came again when I was in Manderscheid, and it was so easy to me because I realized that the best way to end something like this and almost go full circle is to try and make contact with the entity that we call Jehovah or Jesus. Now, I've not had any contact. I've had contact with guardian angels, devils, spirits, just about every type of entity you can imagine, extraterrestrials, interdimensionals, but never have I tried to make contact with the energy that is Jesus. Now, there are many reasons for that. Firstly, it's a very dangerous thing to do because people will immediately say it's fake, it's not true. And also, what could Jesus say? Or indeed, is there really a Jesus? Was there really a Jesus? Was this all just a big made-up story, as religion perhaps is? Is there any point? Has he got a message that he can bring to us? But I kind of knew this was going to happen, and a friend of mine sent me a book about Jesus, and he turns out to be quite an interesting person, particularly if you try to find information that's perhaps not necessarily written in the approved Gospels in the Bible. And as you know, I've been very interested in all the apocryphal books, the ones that were left out of the Bible, such as the Book of Enoch and the Book of Mary Magdalene, etc., etc. But I felt that if I was going to do a final episode, to bring this podcast to a close, I should do my best to try to channel an entity that perhaps represents Jesus, and see what messages that he has, and if he's got anything relevant to tell us in August 2026. Now, I've been procrastinating so much over this episode because it never felt quite right. I felt that maybe I should do it in some really grand setting, some cathedral somewhere, and I was very close to doing it when I was on holiday in Pula in Croatia, when I was having dinner next to, I think it's the Basilica, it's the main cathedral in Pula, and that goes back thousands of years. And if you were going to do something that was about Christ, you'd probably want to get as close to the Christ story as possible, which would obviously be Israel, but Croatia isn't bad, I suppose, and it was very Roman. There was a lot of early Christianity there, but it still didn't feel right. I suppose the closest I actually was to Israel was last year when I was in southern Turkey. But again, I didn't get any great feeling. I thought of maybe I should go to my old favorite, the Dome Cathedral here in Cologne. A stunning building, again, with Roman roots, and as old as the hills. And, if Jesus or his entity was going to appear, maybe that would be a place to do it. But as is always the case with these things, things were not going to be that way, because in fact that's completely and utterly pointless. And all I was doing really was just playing into the narrative of who Jesus is, as has been created by men for thousands of years. I think perhaps beautifully encapsulated in that film Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, where they choose the cup of Christ at the end, and if you choose it correctly and wisely, and you drink water from it, it'll give you eternal life. And if you choose poorly and foolishly, you will die on the spot. And of course our hero watches while the greedy guy thinks that the cup of Christ must be the most elaborate, jewel-encrusted gold goblet you've ever seen. And Indy, of course, realizes that, come on, we're talking about something that has been made up and turned into a huge, if you like, religious industry. And the real cup of a carpenter, if that is indeed what Jesus was, would be made of wood, and it would be very simple. And he reaches and he takes the most simple wooden, I think it's slightly gold-leafed, I can't remember, and he drinks from it, and of course it is the right one. And exactly that's happened to me here. I felt today, I woke up, had no idea that I was going to do this today, but the weather had taken an improved turn from a few days of terrible rain, which was very welcome after all the dry weather we've had here in most of Europe. And I felt this was the day I needed to get out. And it's becoming almost autumn, because where I've chosen to do it is on the side of the Rhine. And I then just was feeling my way. Would I go to a church or would I just sit? And eventually I've just sat, like I've done with so many of my podcasts. I've just sat in the open air in a beautiful natural setting. I'm facing directly east. I'm looking over the Rhine, and I'm looking how low it is because there's been so little rain. The sun is quite strong on my face, but they're clouds, and you can hear the wind in the background. It's the most beautiful natural environment. And in fact, if the Christ energy was going to come through, surely he would come in the outdoors like this. He wouldn't come in a church. He probably wouldn't even approve of that. The only drawback, obviously, is, as I found before, is that many people come by on their bicycles, walking their dogs, and you will, from time to time, I'm sure, during this episode, have various interruptions. But here I am, sitting on this beautiful green bench. I will take a picture of where I am, and I'll make it the podcast picture of the final episode, so you can all get an idea of what I'm doing and where I am. So I've been struggling to think, how do you start? And obviously, I again always just trust my instinct, whether it's the guardian angel that's been following me throughout this whole 3-year series, Titan, or whatever it might be, or it could be the dreams that I've had, or it could be coincidences, serendipity. But believe it or not, I came across, again completely by accident, a book that calls itself The Gospel of Philip. And the Gospel of Philip, as I understand it, was again another one of the apocryphal books that was not included in the Bible, and was in its way an important text that was used by the very early Christians and ignored by the church because, rather like other books, it said things that either contradicted what the established church wanted Christians to believe, or it said things that were going to undermine the potential growth of an established church, or it said things that were slightly embarrassing and that might make people think that there shouldn't be an established church at all. I'm only saying that because I have read a number of these apocryphals, and it is certainly true that in some of them Jesus is quoted verbatim as speaking, and not only speaking during his life, but more importantly, I believe speaking in that period after he was crucified, that Mel Gibson, I think, is about to make a film about, the resurrection of Christ. A very important period that is really not covered properly in the Bible, but is covered in an awful lot of the apocryphal. Probably the most important time for ministry that the Jesus character could have had was to go around talking to people after he was died, because that would have proved to people pretty much and conclusively that he was not human. He was either extraterrestrial, interdimensional, superhuman, whatever way you want to describe it. If you watch various podcasts, you will come across the Rogan podcast, and he was interviewing this amazing lady that I really enjoy, Pasulka, and she has written this book, American Cosmic, but she's got a new book out at the moment, Diane, and she's, I think, a Catholic scholar. She's a professor at a university in religious studies, but she's very open at the moment, also saying that if we're going to be able to understand what's happening to us in the world in terms of alien disclosure, interdimensional people, the history of the world, the history of humanity, we have to be paying attention to these books that were cut out of the Bible. And Mel Gibson, I think, is most definitely going to make a movie about that. Diane was actually talking about a few days ago how J.D. Vance has come forward and talked about aliens, perhaps, or alien visitors or UAPs being demons. And she tries to explain that from his religious point of view, that is probably the only way that he can explain it. It's certainly not my belief, and it's certainly, I don't think, her belief either. But without doubt, these interdimensional beings or extraterrestrial beings or beings that have lived amongst us have been here before us probably, and are always here, have always been here. We've just not necessarily seen them, and they have become the subject of most religious history. And I think the most famous, of course, are the Watchers and the Nephilim from the Book of Enoch. The idea that there was an alien species that sent their people down to basically have sex with the daughters of man and create the Nephilim. Now, I have no idea what all that means, but these histories would indicate that somehow man was a genetically modified experiment or result of other interdimensional or extraterrestrial beings who came to this earth many, many thousands of years ago. And that's not a million miles away from what is being discussed now, and at all levels of alien disclosure. And it's certainly not a contradiction to anyone who's Catholic or religious, because I think most religions are now prepared for the fact that Jesus wasn't the only if you like, alien visitor, and that our God that we see is not the only sort of God. It's not exclusive to us. It's amongst everyone, and that we as human beings are probably not the apex predator on this planet. We're just one of perhaps many, and one of many who've come and lived on this planet and visit regularly. I find that idea quite interesting, and it doesn't frighten me. I don't think anybody who's truly religious should be frightened that this is somehow going to make their faith incompatible. In fact, their faith has been explaining the truth all these years, but it's been interpreted through a lens of religion that has controlled the way that is seen and discussed. And control is obviously the operative word here. The control side of everything is happening still. Groups have emerged over the centuries that try to control the truth and control the information. And again, if you believe in all the alien disclosure stuff, you will believe that there are government bodies that are working separate from the governments that we see, that have for decades been controlling the information that's been discovered through crash retrievals. And as David Grush has said standing on the steps of the Capitol in the United States of America, there has been an ongoing program of alien contact, body recovery, re-engineering of alien technology. And this has been going on for ages. And that many of the larger companies in the world that research things for aerospace and science, and indeed academia, has been co-opted for decades by these people in order to be able to secretly develop the technology, perhaps for good, but maybe perhaps for bad. And again, I was watching Joe Rogan, and he was mentioning that he'd heard that one particular area of research was being able to use the instantaneous travel capability of these UAPs and maybe use them to deliver an atomic bomb to an enemy. I mean, just think about it. This really scares me, and it should scare everyone. But equally, he would like to think that maybe governments are responsible for our safety, and Americans are completely paranoid and feel that if there is a responsibility for government, it is that they should be making their homeland safe. So they can almost excuse that a government would be doing research like that, because they feel that if the American government that they sort of trust isn't doing it, then perhaps governments they don't trust might be doing it, such as Iran or China or Russia. And I suppose there's a feeling that if you don't get it first, it could be game over. Very sad that we've kind of reached that idea of how to use technologies that could change the world so much for the good, and it fills me with fear and worry. And I just do hope that we will get a form of disclosure that will be much better than that, and that it won't be negative, it will be positive. I woke up one night and I found by accident the book of Philip. which is a bit of a strange coincidence since my name is Philip, but that's how these things go. And I managed to download a copy of the Book of Philip, and there were parts of the Book of Philip that just stand out at me, and I've been told that what I need to do is get myself into the right frame of mind, use the Book of Philip, and that will inspire me to be able to tell you what Jehovah Jesus wishes to convey. Now, this is a slightly odd way of doing it, because I've been thinking, how is this all going to come through? Am I going to literally channel Jesus? Am I going to be able to have some sort of vision? Am I going to have some sort of revelation, or what? But no, again, like all these things, it's the simplest thing in the world, and it's something everyone can do. But obviously, perhaps with the skills that I've been able to develop over the last 3 years, using the Book of Philip as the springboard for my thoughts and what comes into my mind seems to be the way it's going to be. Right at the very beginning of the Book of Philip, there is a paragraph 4 which has stuck out at me and is something that I feel that I need to mention. And it reads as, "Atheists do not die because they have never lived." And what I feel I need to say here is that everything I've done in the last 3 years has required a leap of faith. And for me to have that leap of faith, or make that leap of faith, has been incredibly rewarding. I've never been an atheist. I've always been maybe a believer or an agnostic. I was never terribly sure. But most definitely in the last 3 years, I have seen and heard and felt and read stuff that completely and utterly has changed my view on things. I've been surrounded personally by people who don't believe anything, or certainly don't believe the things that I'm doing, which is fine. But equally, I've received many beautiful letters and messages from people who do believe what they're hearing. And I love the way that Philip says that atheists are not alive because they're just shutting themselves off from everything out there. And it's true. You cannot fail but to see what's happening and react to it. It's on some emotional level. And if you don't, you are as good as dead, because you've completely, obviously, closed yourself off from something that is spiritual and something that is part of what we are as humans. And I think that means an awful lot. Moving to paragraph 6. When we were Hebrews, we were orphans, knowing only our mother. Becoming Christians, we discover both our mother and our father. Again, is this trying to convey to me something that if you are just following one particular faith, you are, again, cutting yourself off from so much. And the use of the word mother and feminine is very important to me, because there are many documented descriptions that by people who've been close to interdimensional craft or alien craft or whatever else, or have been abducted, people who are working in this field, people who are religious, they feel that the most strong force of all is feminine, a sort of a feminine force. And I feel that Philip is trying to say now to me that please open your mind, everyone, not just to Christianity, not just to Judaism, in fact, not just to any one religion. Open your mind, discover the truth about both mother and father, about everything, and never stop, but don't just get channeled into one point of view. Light and darkness, life and death, right and left, are brothers and sisters. They are inseparable. This is why goodness is not always good. And that really sticks out at me. there is a side of me that really is suspicious of many things, particularly organized religions, because they present themselves as being good. And that goodness is what you grow up believing is the only true goodness. But then you're going to cut yourself off from everything that perhaps people call bad or wrong, such as anything to do with the occult, or anything to do with other religions, or anything to do with extraterrestrials or interdimensionals. And I think what Philip is saying to me right now, again, is that there are just so many sides to life. There's light and dark, there's left and right, there's up and down. They're all inseparable. They're all part of the same thing. Don't get fooled by, say, a church or a religious leader or anyone who tells you there is only one way that this works. I think Philip is trying to warn people that you have to understand that there is a reality. And the reality that most people experience isn't real. And that's quite a hard thing to understand. But I can understand that certainly. And I think more and more scientists are coming forward now and giving this idea that we do live in some form of simulation. And what we're looking at is not real. But it is real to us in terms of what we can touch and the experiences that we have. But we've chosen that reality. We've made this reality out of our thoughts or what we wanted to experience before we were born. So in that respect, it's a manufactured reality. So yes, it's not real, but it is real. And I think Philip is trying to tell people, just don't take life at first sight. He gives a warning in chapter 13 that high spiritual powers wanted to deceive humanity because they saw goodness engendered in him. Now this is, again, a slightly worrying point of view from Philip, that the Jesus energy, the Jesus character, whether he was an alien who came down, he was definitely not human, so he must have been an alien. Was he the Son of God? I don't know, whoever God is. But whatever he did and whatever his life was, the powers that be, the earthly powers that be, and maybe other powers that are not earthly, tried to use his word to deceive people. They wanted to obscure his word, because his real message was something that was going to mean that they would lose control. Philip said that they alienate with simulations and appearances. They make a free person into a slave. These harmful powers do not want human beings to be saved. They instill in them a taste for sacrifices. People then offer animals to these powers. What was living becomes dead, and their offering becomes a murder. I've thought an awful lot too lately. Again, something has been drawing me to veganism and vegetarianism. And this fits in very well with the gradual change that's happening in me. I've been a meat eater all my life. And yet I'm surrounded, my best friends in the world are vegan. And why am I still eating animals? It seems to be almost incompatible with spirituality, that we live here, we share consciousness with so many different types of animals and forms of life. And yet most of us don't seem to have any problem with killing animals and eating them. And I'm rapidly beginning to come to that philosophical conclusion that I have to stop eating meat. I know you're probably going to say, wow, it's a bit late, isn't it? But I didn't realize until doing this podcast how disgusting it is actually what I'm doing. It's nothing perhaps to do with animal welfare in that respect, or the terrible ways that they're treated. I've known that for years. it's to do with the philosophical side of things for me, that it's like almost eating your friends. How could you be doing that? Surely there has to be a better way. Philip wants people to realize that the powers that be in this world, which I'm sure were the same powers then, the powers that organize man and claim to be running the world, they thought that their power was everything and that they could do what they wanted to do. But Philip is actually saying, no, it's actually what he calls the Holy Spirit, that which through them was working, even if they didn't realize it, towards its agenda. So it's as if, okay, we've been sort of servants or slaves to these powers that have been running the world since the year dot. But really, in the background, we've never been alone. We've always been free in that respect, that the aliens or the interdimensional beings that perhaps created us or created the world or created this whole illusion that we live in is still in control, and has somehow allowed this to happen. And they will allow this to happen up till a time of harvest, which again sounds a little freaky. It sounds a little bit like the end of times, and but maybe it's also that if we have been put on this planet as experiments or as a form of whatever reason an alien species might want to populate a planet and create humans or other forms of life, at one point they're going to come back to see what they've created and how it's going, and maybe they're going to take some of us away. It does kind of ring a little bit like alien abductions. It also sounds remarkably similar to some of the more scary stuff that I've heard about through the internet, where some of the people who claim to be whistleblowers have learned that our interaction with these interdimensional beings has involved giving humans in return for technological learning. And for some reason, they are, the extraterrestrials, interdimensionals, whatever they are interested in specimens. Maybe this is all a bit scientific. Maybe this is all part of their interest in developing species. Philip goes one step further now, and he actually wants to blow the whole Jesus myth. And he wants to say that some say that Mary was impregnated by the grace of the Holy Spirit, but they do not know what they say. How could the feminine impregnate the feminine? Mary was not the mother of Christ in a way, he's saying. He's saying that it's impossible that there was this immaculate conception. This, again, was an illusion that was created for whatever reason by the powers that be. Mary may have had something to do with Jesus, but Jesus was a visitor. He came from another realm, another dimension, directly, and not through a human woman. Philip also, I think, wants to break the myth that perhaps is very prominent in the Christian community, that the flesh and the blood of Jesus was so important and represented something perhaps way beyond what was physically going on. He said, "Those who do not eat my flesh and do not drink my blood have not life in them." He further explains that flesh is basically word, and blood, if you like, is breath or the life force in all human beings. The breath animates the flesh, and that's very much the idea that I feel, that we have a soul. Our soul comes into our flesh and animates our flesh at the time of conception. And the Word, if you like, is not only teachings, but it's being explained to me. It's quite hard to get that message through. It's not religious teachings. It's not Christianity or any other religion. The Word is the ultimate truth. It is what we carry inside us. It's all the lives that we've had. It's all the experiences that we've had. It's like a recording of everything that our soul is. So we have a word in us. Some people can get in touch with that word. And we have a breath. We have a life force. And that is all that was being conveyed with this symbolic drinking of blood and eating of flesh, or the bread and the wine. Philip then, I think, talks about one of the most important aspects of spirituality, and that's love. And he writes in chapter 31 of his Gospel that those who are nourished by the word which comes to the mouth go toward their own realization. The realization, or the realized human, is fertilized by a kiss and is born through a kiss. This is why we kiss each other, giving birth to each other through the love that is in us. Love is the most important force in the universe. It's a force that I remember seeing in the Christopher Nolan film Interstellar being almost turned into a physical force. This sense of love is like gravity. It's incredibly strong. Philip then talks also how in our life we will always have people around us that some people call soulmates. And I've come across this again in the last 3 years, that we choose quite often to reincarnate our lives with people that we always feel comfortable with, if you like, our travel buddies. And in the case of the Jesus character, he brought Mary, his mother, Philip says, his sister of his mother, and Miriam of Magdala, known as his companion. For him, Miriam is a sister, a mother, and a wife. Now, again, you don't see that very often, the fact that Jesus was married. A lot of this, you could say, from a conspiracy point of view, has been erased from Christianity. It came in that book by Dan Brown, The Da Vinci Code, very, very clear, and was massively popularized. Again, the feminine force was erased for some reason by the Catholic Church, maybe because it frightened the male patriarchy. But Philip is saying quite definitely that he had a wife, and he chose these people to be around him in this life because, if you like, they were his traveling companions. Maybe they were also from another dimension. Philip, throughout the Gospel, is very keen that we understand that there is no death. Again, his idea of life after death is something that we will learn about, and that'll be true wisdom if we can understand that life is purely a phase and death is not the end. Philip wants us to use the energies that we have within us. I think many of these energies we've lost. These energies need to be reawakened. These energies are good and evil, right and left. They can be aligned and they can be used by us to help create and to change things in a positive way. So very strongly throughout the Gospel, but specifically in verse 42, I'm not going to interpret the very strange writings because it sounds very bizarre when he talks about adultery and murder. But all I will say, my feeling that comes through, is that Philip is trying to get us to understand that good is almost the same as evil. that male is the same as female, and that carnal, or if you like, physical sexual desires are also spiritual. And this is a fascinating thing, because again, down the centuries, down the millennia, religions, established religions, have tried to separate good from evil, male from female, and carnal from spiritual. And here's Philip trying to get us to understand that it's all the same, it's all equally as important, and is all part of what being human is. And once we've understood that, Philip says that you will kind of know your breath, you will know your Christ, you will know your Father. He's indicating that once we come to this realization, we will realize that we are Christ. We humans are Christ. And we have a creator, and we have a spiritual element of us. We have a word that's in us. But there is no separate Christ figure. Some people have said quite often that we are all God, but I think Philip is indicating that we are basically Christ. So if we are Jesus, if we are the Jesus character in all the stories, then God, or the Creator, is the one who made us. He is the one who was sacrificed. He is the one that, if you like, we have somehow turned our back on and maybe have murdered in the history of humanity. And Philip is, I think, trying to get us to realize that we're all sons of God, whoever we are, whoever we think our Father is. We are all sons of God. It doesn't matter what religion you are. It doesn't matter what color, what creed. Nothing matters what sex you are. We are all the sons, he uses the word sons, but let's say sons and daughters of God. And it doesn't matter that you call yourself a Christian or a Jew or a Muslim. We're all the same. We are all humanity. We are all the same. He talks about our wife, or Jesus's wife, Mary, Miriam of Magdala. And he mentions the teacher loved her more than all his disciples. He often kissed her on the mouth. And when the disciples saw how he loved Miriam, they asked him, "Why do you love her more than us?" And the teacher answered, "How can it be that I do not love you as much as I love her?" When a blind man and one who sees are both in the dark, there is no difference between them. But when they both come forth into the light, one sees it, and the other remains in darkness. And the teacher said, "Blessed are those who are before existing, for those who were and will be." I find that the most beautiful bit, because if Jesus or us, we have a wife, we have a lover, we should not get into a trap of feeling that having one person, one wife or one lover is the way things should be. This is, if you like, I feel, Philip telling people that this idea that we have to be monogamous, if you like, we have to belong to one person, the whole idea of belonging to one person, I think he's actually saying is complete rubbish. It's a jealousy that's been installed into mankind. We should be loving all people, and if we can love them equally, and that is the way it should be, because we are all the same. And for the disciples, if you like, to say that he somehow loved Miriam more than he loves them shows you the stupidity of all this jealousy. But unfortunately, of course, that word never really made it into the biblical texts, and never made it into the philosophy of men and the morality of men, and it was twisted into this idea that you can only love one person and one person at the same time. But what nonsense that is. I think also Philip completely destroys the church's interpretation of male and female. Masculine was always portrayed throughout the history of man in a particular way, as was feminine. And usually I would say masculine was the ones who represented the power and the dominion. And he actually talks about how many unclean spirits are masculine and others are feminine. The masculine ones unite with souls who inhabit a female form. The feminine ones mate with souls who inhabit a male form. None can be free with respect to those forms unless they receive a power which is both masculine and feminine. I think Philip is saying there that there is nothing more beautiful than a masculine and a feminine energy. But that doesn't necessarily mean that there's suddenly a problem with people who are gay or trans or anything else. They are still masculine and feminine. I think he's trying to say that the joining of masculine energy and feminine energy is the most beautiful thing that can happen. And of course it was called in the early days, and still is, being united in marriage. But I think he's trying to encourage people to think beyond just the limitations of marriage. Ignorance is the cause of all evil and serves death. Nothing has been or ever will be born from ignorance. While hidden, truth is like ignorance. It keeps to itself. Ignorance is slavery. Knowledge is freedom. And finally, I will read the very last part. The fire that burns by night flares up and then is gone. But the mystery of that embrace is never extinguished. It happens in the light of day, which knows no sunset. If someone experiences trust and consciousness in the heart of the embrace, they become a child of light. If someone does not receive these, it is because they remain attached to what they know. When they cease to be attached, they will be able to receive them. Whoever receives this light in nakedness will no longer be recognizable. None will be able to grasp them. None will be able to make them sad or miserable, whether they are in this world or have left it. They already know the truth in images. For them, this world has become another world, and this temple space is fullness. They are who they are. They are one. Neither shadow nor night can hide them. So I'm really happy to end my 100th and last podcast with the words of the Gospel of Philip. What a wonderful gospel. He's only just telling us to be ourselves, to be honest, to not just accept what one person says, but to have an open mind and to listen to lots of voices and to understand that we as human beings are so much more than we've been led to believe, that we are part of everything and everything is part of us. It's a wonderful, if you like, encapsulation of what I've learned in the last 3 years, and a very appropriate way to end my 3 years' work. So thank you very much to everyone over the last 3 years who've been listening to my podcast, and those who've got my book, and those who've listened to the audio book. I've really enjoyed doing this, but I know it's time to stop. There's nothing more than I can add. It's up to you now to keep your eyes open to see the new world that's coming very soon. The understanding that Philip talks about, that we have to learn, we have to realize that we are more than just physically human. We are part of something much greater. Maybe we were even created with the purpose that eventually it would be revealed to us who we are and where we came from. I believe that, and I think that's what's happening right now. That is this wonderful time that we're living in at the moment. People have waited thousands of years for this revelation, and it's about to come. But for me, I know that. I'm happy with that knowledge. I don't need to think about it every waking minute anymore. I feel I've done my duty to the souls who've wanted to come through. I've allowed them to come through and not to dominate me. I passed the messages that need to be passed. Maybe my mission will be something different. Maybe I will do something completely new in a few weeks, a few months' time. Maybe it'll still be related to spirituality. But I feel the Talking to the Dead podcast has reached its end. And I don't go with sadness. I go with tremendous happiness and such gratitude that I've been part of this, and I've learned so much. And I know I've been able to help some people. And I just want to end with one final statement that I saw in a film, and it was a gravestone, and it was what was written on the grave. And it said that if a person can help one person, they help everybody. And I hope that even if I've just helped a few people, in a way maybe I've done something to help humanity. And to help humanity was something that I was told I would do by a psychic medium all those years ago at the Spiritualist Center in Belgrave Square. And I resurrected all of that 3 years ago. And it's been the greatest joy to try to help people. Thank you so much.